Well, happy Pride Month, everybody. I am back today to do I guess like a topic video or a list video. And I wanted to do this and I wanted to collect a list and get some films together because it is Pride Month. And I think, for some of you out there that have not been watching my channel for a really long time, I talk a lot about how I was raised in a really conservative household. My dad was a minister. I was taught for most of my life that, gay people were evil and that it was a sin and all this other stuff, while throughout my life struggling with my own sexuality and identity. And it took me 26 years. I'm going to be 33 this year. It took me around 26 years to finally come to terms and embrace my identity, which is that I'm a member of the LGBTQ community. I identify as pansexual. It was a really incredible experience for me to finally, be comfortable with myself and to love myself for who I am, because for so long I felt like I had to be something that I wasn't. And I spent most of my life living by what other people told me that I had to be, being not only forced into, religious ideologies, but being a minister's son. You are told for so long that you have to act a certain way and that you have to live up to certain standards and be something. Even when it comes to movies, I had to hide a lot of the films that I really loved and appreciated because I could be scrutinized for enjoying those things, and had to go through a lot of my early life kind of keeping all that stuff to myself. And this time of year is really important for a lot of people, not just myself, but a lot of people out there, because it's people being able to celebrate who they are and their existence. And unfortunately, it's also an incredibly difficult time for a lot of people, especially people. I wear this shirt quite a bit because I want people to know, like, the trans community right now is under attack by a lot of politicians in our country, and it's just trying to make it more difficult for them to live their lives and embrace who they are. And at the end of the day, no matter what your background is, I don't understand why so many people care so much about how other people live their lives and what makes them happy. If they are not doing physical harm to other people, I don't understand why you care how other people live their lives. And so I think this month is really important to celebrate those people, and even if you are not a member of the queer community, to show your support and to show that you care for those people and that you will support those people, because they need it. They need voices. They need people to help them. They need people to be there in support. And I think, movies are a great way for that as well, because a lot of times filmmakers can use film showcase an issue or showcase something that's important to them that they feel like they can get across through the filmmaking medium. And there's been incredible queer directors and queer actors and queer themes in film throughout the entirety of history. And I wanted to take today to shine a light on some of my personal favorite films that would be considered queer or LGBTQ cinema. And I do want to say really quick before I get started, as a disclaimer, I have Instagram links here, Twitter links. If you're someone out there who's going through a lot, especially if you're a member of the queer community, or if you're just dealing and overwhelmed, if you live in a state that's really bringing you down, I'm always here to talk. If you need to talk to someone about it, I'm always here to listen. I want to try to be as supportive as I possibly can, and just know that it is important who you are as a person. Who you are is very important to me and should be important to other people, and all I want to do is share love and share empathy and compassion for other people. And Pride Month is an exciting time, and so I want to share this list today. I'll get done blabbering now. We're going to get into it. I'm going to share some of my favorite LGBTQ films that I think are really important, and that ones that I think that you should check out. So first up on the list is going to be one of my favorite queer films of all time, and that is Portrait of a Lady on Fire from director Celine Sciamma. This movie absolutely floored me when I watched it the first time, because it's looking at queer romance in a time that it would be impossible to be queer. You could be executed for this, literally, especially it's two women, so it's even more difficult in this time period. And I thought it was such an interesting idea to have this woman who's commissioned to paint this other woman who is engaged to be married, and the two of them forming this blossoming relationship together. The dialogue in this film is absolutely brilliant. The cinematography is some of the best that I have ever seen. The third act in this movie is just absolutely incredible in every way. It doesn't feel hokey. It doesn't feel overblown. It feels feels very realistic. Celine Sciamma, over time now, since I've watched Portrait of a Lady on Fire, has become one of my favorite directors. I've seen all of her films but one, and most of her films do cover queer subject matter. Films like Water Lilies and Tomboy, and I know her other film Girlhood, which I have not seen, all cover, queer life. And I think that it's really important to see directors that are spending their entire career to shed a light on these important issues. And Portrait of a Lady on Fire obviously takes place a very long time ago, but I don't think that it makes the film any less poignant or beautiful or moving. It's one of my favorite films of all time. It's a film that I will always recommend to people, and I had to include it on this list. Up next is another film that everyone knows about, but Barry Jenkins' Moonlight. This movie is absolutely incredible, and although I do have some qualms with the third act, I don't think that it's perfect. I really love the storytelling method of this and looking at our lead character's life through three very important pivotal moments in their existence. You're looking at a queer person in the African American community who is surrounded by overt masculinity, and you see that theme sometimes resonate in films, and I think Barry Jenkins does such an amazing job at looking at how when you are a gay person in a community that is overtly masculinized and that you can't really embrace that part of yourself without worrying that you're going to come into some kind of violence or verbal hate or just persecuted because you're trying to be who you are, and how much you have to hide that and act like you aren't that. It's just really an incredible movie that speaks volumes about the queer experience, especially in the African American community. I think all of the performances in this thing are absolutely amazing. The score is beautiful. Barry Jenkins' cinematography is just some of the most mesmerizing in film. The way that he uses color in this film, and If Beale Street Can Talk, some of my favorite cinematography that exists, period. It's just a beautiful movie that I think is really important in the scope of queer cinema, and I had to include it on this list. Up next is going to be a film I watched relatively recently, but the film But I'm a Cheerleader, starring Natasha Lyonne. This leans way more in the comedic direction, but I thought that it was so interesting in this time period that there was a movie made about a young girl in high school who her parents are worried that she's going to be gay, and they essentially send her to conversion therapy camp. But instead of it being a really dark, depressing drama, it is a really hysterical, over-the-top comedy that is so brilliantly written. The satire in it is pitch perfect, and there are some really beautiful dramatic moments laced throughout the really overblown comedic moments. And Natasha Lyonne is someone who I've loved for a really long time. I think she is a brilliant actress. I think everyone that shows up in this movie gives a really great performance. There's even a young Melanie Linsky in this film. I just thought that it was pitch perfectly hilarious, and I think that it's really important in the scope of queer cinema, because a lot of times when it comes to queer cinema, you think about trauma, and trauma is going to exist in queer cinema because it's a fact of life. It's a reality, right? If you are a queer person, you've probably experienced some sort of trauma in your life, and so that's obviously going to exist throughout the scope of queer cinema. But I thought it was cool to watch a movie that's targeted way more at the comedic elements, and it handles it so well. It's one I could see myself rewatching over and over and over again. It is a brilliant movie. I'm glad I finally got around to watching it, and I look forward to watching it a lot more in years to come. Up next, I have to mention at least one John Waters film, and I might as well mention the most extreme one, Pink Flamingos. And as some people out there might not see this as like, hey Nate, this is your normal LGBTQ or queer film, but I think John Waters is the epitome of what is important in queer cinema, because you look at a man who was a gay man in the 1970s, and you look at what kind of things gay people had to go through in the 60s and the 70s. It's not nearly as accepted and as looked at as okay as it is now. I think a poll was ran recently, and it's somewhere around 72% of Americans are okay with gay marriage. That's a way larger portion than I imagine existed back then. And so John Waters with Pink Flamingos, being told you're disgusting or you're horrible or you're vile just because of how you're trying to live your life. And to me, this is John Waters saying, hey, you know what? You think I'm a piece of trash? You think I'm disgusting? Well, I'm going to throw it right back at you. And it is the biggest fuck you in the world. And it is so impressive that he is able to get away with some of the stuff he's able to get away with. Divine is an absolute icon, a comedic genius, one of the greatest living performers to ever live. I love Divine. I love watching her on screen. She just completely commands and demands your attention whenever she's in any sort of material, and she is brilliant in this film. Makes me so uncomfortable in a couple of scenes in the best way possible. This movie is just an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes of purely being disturbed in a way that only John Waters can. There are some of the most hilarious moments I've ever seen. There are some of the most disturbing things I've ever watched. I'm glad I got my Criterion copy with my Pink Flamingos barf bag in it. It is a quintessential film in LGBTQ cinema, and I think everyone needs to watch it at least once if you can stomach it. Up next is going to be the film Thelma from director Joachim Trier. I fell in love with Joachim Trier's work after watching The Worst Person in the World, and I found out that he did a movie about a girl with telekinetic powers, and I immediately had to watch it and didn't realize that it was so embedded in the ideas of queer cinema. This is about a young woman who has a highly conservative family. She goes off to school on her own. You can tell that she's really having a difficult time getting adjusted because she's so used to the way she lives with her parents and the way that her parents want her to live and want her to act. And what you realize throughout the film is she is attracted to this young woman that she meets. You can tell she's starting to fall for her in a way, and every time that she has that attraction for her, or their chemistry together starts to blossom and grow, her powers get stronger and stronger. And the parents obviously don't want these things to happen. They want to subdue her powers. And it's so much a statement about the queer experience, right? Because so many people want to tell you that you can't live your life, and that those powers for her could do really good things for people. And instead of, embracing it and seeing it as something beautiful that could help other people, they see it as horrifying and terrible because it's different. And that allegory is so brilliantly explored through this type of film. It's very much like an X-Men character getting a side quest. And I love this movie. It's so well shot. It's so suspenseful. It's so engaging. I love Joachim Trier. I can't wait to watch more films that he puts out because he is a phenomenal director. Up next is going to be a coming-of-age film that I feel like no one ever talks about, and that's going to be the film House of Hummingbird, directed by Kim Bora. And this is about a young girl who is navigating her way through life. She's, I want to say she's like a teenager. She's probably like 13 or 14, very young, going to school, has an interesting relationship with her parents, just trying to navigate her life. And she is also trying to come to terms with her sexuality at a young age because she takes interest in this young girl. And you can tell it's not very overt in the movie. There's a lot of subtlety to it, but the internal struggle that comes with that, especially with the cultural differences that exist in this movie, you can tell that it's handled really brilliantly. And so much of the emotion in this film is through just glances and expression, less through like expositional dialogue. And that's something that I really appreciate, especially in coming of age films, because a lot of times in coming of age movies, it can just be expositional dump over and over again. And in this, it's so much more quiet and nuanced. It's one of the best coming of age movies I've ever seen. And I think that it showcases the LGBTQ experience in a very different way. And that's something that I can really appreciate. Up next is going to be the film The Handmaiden from Park Chan-wook. Park Chan-wook is one of my favorite directors. This is a crazy psychological thriller that goes in a million different directions that you would never expect, but at the center of all of it is a queer romance. And I think the queer romance element is handled really well. Some of the criticisms I would have of this movie is the sex scenes could be seen through a very male gaze at moments. I feel like if this was directed by a woman, it would probably be portrayed very differently than what it is, but I don't think it takes away from the overall theme and point that the movie is trying to make. I think that that all comes through, even with the way that I feel about some of those other sequences. But it's so beautifully shot. Park Chan-wook does a great job at building up tension and suspense. It's disturbing at moments. It has some moments that'll make you laugh, surprisingly, amidst all of the really disturbing elements. And it's just a really phenomenal time. If you've never seen The Handmaiden, highly, highly recommend. I don't think I could get through this list without mentioning Yorgos Lanthimos is the favorite, one of my favorite directors ever. This is a really interesting love triangle that blossoms between Queen Anne and these two other women. They're played by Olivia Colman, Rachel Weisz, and Emma Stone. This is pitch perfect dark comedy like Yorgos Lanthimos is known for. It's like really disturbing at moments. It has some really crazy plot twists that I did not expect. It's got Olivia Colman an Oscar that she 100% deserved because she gave a brilliant performance in this film. I love period pieces that kind of subvert your expectations as to what a period piece can be. Yorgos is one of my favorite directors. This movie is really fascinating, especially looking at a queer love triangle at this time period and how a lot of it is power dynamics. And I thought that was really fascinating. It's a brilliant movie. You should 100% check it out. I want to mention a film from a trans director and also actress. Her name is Isabel Sandoval. She made a film called Lingua Franca that is about a young undocumented woman who she's trying to get a green card marriage so that she can continue to live and support her family where she is trying to live. And the movie explores, she meets this person, they start to get in a relationship together. And so what's really brilliant about this film is you're getting elements of the trans experience while also getting elements of what it's like to be an immigrant in the United States of America, especially an undocumented immigrant. And so you get a lot of things thrown at you, but they're handled really well and through some delicate nuance. I think the cinematography in this thing's really great. I think all the performances, especially Isabel's performance, is really fantastic. I think it's a movie that benefits from rewatch as well because there's a lot of subtlety in it that I think is handled really brilliantly, and it's a movie I'm really glad I got a chance to check out, and I try to recommend it to as many people as I can. And then I quickly want to mention one more film. I could go on and on about this, but most recently David Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future, and this is one of those films that's much more like the themes resonate with the themes of what the LGBTQ community is going through, especially the trans community. Crimes of the Future looks at this group of people who literally they get to a point where they find out they can digest plastics, and that in order to save the environment and to stop the environment from being destroyed, they can get themselves to a point where they will be able to ingest plastics in order to survive. And the government doesn't want that to happen. The government doesn't want those people to exist. And so it's all about suppression and silencing that community. And when I was reading in interviews about how David Cronenberg wanted to align this with the trans experience and what a lot of people in the trans community had to go through, it immediately just clicked in my brain because I was thinking that through a lot of the runtime of the film. And I think that on revisiting this one, it resonates even more. I think it's a great science fiction movie that has really amazing performances and a really great soundtrack. But on top of that, you have the really interesting thematic elements as well. And it's just an absolutely brilliant film that I think more people need to see. So what are some of your favorite LGBTQ films? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. I'm always trying to add more into my repertoire. I could have made like 50 or 60 films on this list, but I didn't want it to go on for forever. But I wanted to recommend some that I really love and appreciate. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.